Welcome to this explainer. Okay, today we are diving straight into the source text to track the absolutely fascinating character arc of one of history's most foundational figures. We're talking about Peter. We're going to look at why the biblical narrative specifically positions him to lead. Honestly, it's a story of unbelievable transformation, and the source material lays out this brilliant blueprint of exactly how it all went down. So, that brings us to this central mystery we're unpacking today. How did an aggressive, boastful fisherman become the foundational rock of a global faith? I mean, when you look at his origins, it's a massive puzzle. This explainer isn't just some dry history lesson. It is a compelling, very human story of growth, deeply flawed beginnings, and what the narrative presents as sheer divine potential.
All right, Section 1, The Paradox of Peter, a Flawed Foundation.
You know, Peter represents this wild contrast that makes him such a fascinating case study. On one hand, the texts paint a picture of a guy with a super aggressive, really boastful personality. He was the kind of person who constantly stumbled over his own words and actions, just rough edges everywhere, acting way before he actually thought things through. But at the exact same time, he had this incredibly deep faith and a real capacity for divine revelation. Despite his obvious character flaws, that unique spiritual depth completely set him apart from the rest of the group. They all faced challenges early on, sure, but Peter's growth within this narrative, it is absolutely staggering. Moving on to Section 2, Divine Revelation and Faith, the Spark of Recognition. Okay, picture the scene. We're in Matthew chapter 16. Jesus turns to his disciples and drops this crucial, defining question. Who do people say that the Son of Man is? Now, naturally, the disciples start throwing out all sorts of answers based on public opinion. They're basically just echoing the rumors floating around the crowds at the time. But Peter, he doesn't do that. Nope. Without a single second of hesitation, Peter boldly replies, "You are the Christ, the Son of the living God." Now, put yourself in the historical context here. Making a definitive, earth-shattering declaration like that was incredibly dangerous. In a sea of people just guessing and whispering rumors, flat-out claiming someone was the long-awaited Messiah carried immense political and religious weight. But Peter just puts it all out there. It completely changed the group's trajectory and really showcased his raw, unfiltered faith. So based on that text, we can pull out three really important truths about Peter. First off, he was the absolute first among the disciples to openly recognize Jesus as the Messiah, which instantly establishes him as a leader. Second, the text is clear that this insight wasn't just human logic or some clever deduction. The narrative states he received direct divine revelation from God the Father. And third, it demonstrated an incredibly strong, unwavering faith. This moment just brilliantly illustrates what was really seen in him, way beyond that rough exterior we talked about earlier. Section 3. Humility at the Last Supper, the refining fire. Now, having bold faith isn't the whole equation, is it? Let's walk through this deeply emotional sequence from John chapter 13 because it perfectly captures Peter's internal battle. We see his aggressive faith getting tempered with deep reverence. So Jesus begins to wash the disciples' feet. Step 1, pure resistance. Peter literally says, "Lord, are you going to wash my feet?" He recognizes his teacher's authority, feels totally unworthy, and just reacts out of profound reverence. Then we hit step 2, the condition. Jesus tells him, "Unless I wash you, you have no part with me." And wow, immediately we pivot to step 3, complete surrender. Peter cries out, "Then Lord, not just my feet, but my hands and my head as well." The big takeaway here is watching his initial resistance instantly flip into this eager, almost desperate desire to be made holy. It reveals a surprisingly humble heart beating right underneath all that brashness. Which brings us to Section 4, boldness in the church, the outward shift. That internal transformation we just talked about, it completely changes his outward actions. When we move into the book of Acts, we see this rapid-fire progression in his public ministry, and it is totally stripped of his old ego. First, in Acts 3, Peter and John heal a lame man. The crowd is just absolutely blown away. But what does Peter do? He immediately deflects the glory. He asks the crowd why they're staring as if he did it by his own power, completely redirecting their attention. And then, zooming ahead to Acts 4 and 5, we see him standing up and openly defying the Sanhedrin, literally the highest, most powerful Jewish council of the time. This is a man who is now totally dedicated to his cause, zero concern for his own reputation, zero concern for his safety. When the Sanhedrin ordered them to stop preaching, Peter and the apostles boldly declared, "We must obey God rather than human beings." That is a powerful, definitive statement right there. It just perfectly illustrates his firm, unwavering commitment to the message of the source text. He's putting that above earthly authorities, even while staring down severe persecution and the very real threat of imprisonment. And he follows it up with this incredible line, "For we cannot help speaking about what we have seen and heard." I love this because it shows how his old, aggressive boastfulness has been completely overwritten. His boldness isn't an ego trip anymore. It's just this unstoppable outflow of his personal witness and total dedication to the gospel message.
Section 5. The Legacy of Cephas, Building on the Rock.
This text from Matthew 16 is basically the narrative climax of his entire character arc. Jesus declares, "And I say also unto thee, that thou art Peter, and upon this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it." The text actually goes on to describe him being given the keys to the kingdom of heaven. Within the context of the story, handing that level of responsibility over to a formal fisherman, it's absolutely mind-blowing. And the amazing part is, it all traces back to his given identity. Back in John chapter 1, Jesus told him, "You will be called Cephas," which translates to Peter, which literally means rock. It's an incredible narrative payoff. Long before anyone else saw it, the text implies his true potential was already known. That aggressive, constantly stumbling man was slowly, deliberately forged into a solid, enduring foundation. So, wrapping this up, why does Peter stand out as such a prominent figure in this history? Well, his enduring legacy is built on that divine revelation and bold faith. It's built on his remarkable leadership in proclaiming his message and his steadfastness in literally the most difficult circumstances imaginable. But honestly, perhaps the most important part of his legacy is his ability to rise again after stumbling. He was far from perfect, but he was always willing to be refined. I really want to leave you with this final thought to chew on. If the foundation of a global faith was built by someone who aggressively stumbled, someone who made major mistakes and had to learn really deep humility, well, what true potential might be waiting to be unlocked within your own flaws? Peter's story tells us that our rough edges aren't the end of our story. Actually, scratch that. They might just be the exact raw material needed for our greatest purpose. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep learning, keep growing, and I'll catch you on the next one.